In January, President Trump predicted the war with Iran would be over in 4 weeks. 6 months later, it's still going, and both sides are stuck. Here's the full picture of how a war built on quick, decisive strikes turned into a grinding standoff, and why a narrow strip of water in the Persian Gulf is now one of the most closely watched places on Earth. When the United States and Israel launched their campaign against Iran, the plan looked simple on paper. Hit Iran's nuclear infrastructure hard enough, and Tehran would come to the table on Washington's terms. And in the opening weeks, that plan seemed to be working. U.S. and Israeli strikes badly damaged 3 of Iran's known uranium enrichment sites, and a string of targeted killings took out several of the country's leading nuclear scientists. Intelligence assessments before the war put Iran's so-called nuclear breakout time, the time it would need to build a weapon, at around 6 months. After the strikes, that estimate stretched out to nearly a year. On paper, that's real progress, but progress toward disarmament is not the same as winning a war, and this is where things stalled. Iran did not surrender, and it did not sign a deal. A ceasefire framework floated back in June quietly fell apart within weeks, and there has been no serious diplomatic breakthrough since. What's emerged instead is a grinding contest of attrition, with neither side able to force the other's hand. Recognizing this, the Trump administration has shifted strategy. Rather than continuing with new military strikes, the U.S. is leaning back into economic pressure, tightening sanctions, and hoping to squeeze Iran's government from the inside instead of the outside. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has told allies that new strikes are unlikely, in his words, for the time being. That pivot brings us to the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway between Iran and Oman that roughly a fifth of the world's oil shipments pass through every single day. Since the war began, shipping through the strait has been running well below normal levels, as tankers and shipping companies weigh the risk of getting caught in the crossfire of a conflict that refuses to end cleanly. Iran and Oman are now in talks to try to stabilize maritime traffic through the strait, but until there's an actual resolution to the underlying war, that traffic is going to keep running scared. And that matters well beyond the region, because when oil shipping gets nervous, oil prices get nervous, and when oil prices get nervous, that pressure runs straight through to gas pumps and grocery bills worldwide. Back home, this war is becoming a genuine political liability. Only 31% of Americans currently approve of the conflict, a notably weaker number than comparable early stages of other recent U.S. wars, including Afghanistan, which held majority approval for years after it began. A war that was sold as fast and decisive is now a slow-burning drag on approval ratings, with no clean off-ramp in sight. So where does this actually go from here? Iran has proven it won't fold under military pressure alone, which is exactly why Washington is now betting on economic pressure instead. But sanctions take time to bite, and time is precisely what a war with dropping approval ratings does not have on its side. Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz remains the pressure point that connects all of it, a single choke point where a regional standoff becomes a global economic story overnight. Watch that strait. If tensions there spike again, you'll feel it well before the next headline breaks. If you want the news explained like this with the actual context and not just the headline, follow the channel for more.